My name is Emily Carter, a 45-year-old working professional and mother. For most of my adult life, I've lived under one roof with my husband, Thomas, and his parents. It wasn't an ideal arrangement, but we made it work. Or at least, I thought we did. Thomas and I met at a community event nearly 20 years ago. Our connection was instant, and within a year, we were married. It was a simple ceremony, nothing extravagant. Back then, I thought our love could overcome any obstacle. That belief carried me through the early years of living with his parents. They weren't bad people, but they were set in their ways. My mother-in-law, Margaret, had a knack for finding fault in everything I did, while my father-in-law, George, was more of a silent observer. He rarely intervened, but always seemed to be watching. It started subtly. Margaret would correct the way I folded towels, or hint that my cooking could use improvement. At first, I brushed it off as her attempt to help. Over time, though, her comments grew sharper, and her patience with me thinned. Thomas was often away for work, leaving me to navigate the tension alone. As the years passed, my role in the household expanded. When our daughter Lily was born, I took on the responsibilities of caregiving, household chores, and maintaining a part-time job. Margaret's health began to decline around the same time, and naturally, the caregiving duties fell to me. George helped when he could, but the bulk of the work was mine. "Emily, could you bring me my tea? And don't forget to use the good china," Margaret would call out from her armchair. I would comply, balancing her requests with everything else on my plate. Some days, it felt like I was running a marathon with no finish line in sight. One evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, Margaret's sharp tone broke the quiet. "Why don't you spend more time with Lily? She needs her mother. You're always busy doing other things." Her words stung. I wanted to tell her that the other things were what kept the household running, but I held my tongue. I didn't want to cause a scene. Then a turning point came. Thomas's work required him to take an overseas assignment that would keep him away for almost a year. He assured me it was a great opportunity, both financially and professionally. "It'll be tough, but we'll manage," he said, kissing me goodbye at the airport. I nodded, hiding my unease. With Thomas gone, Margaret's demeanor shifted. The thin veil of civility she maintained when he was around disappeared. Her remarks became more cutting, her requests more demanding. "If you're so busy all the time, maybe you're not cut out to be a wife and mother," she said one afternoon, her words dripping with disdain. Lily, now a bright and observant 10-year-old, began to notice. "Mom, why is Grandma always so mean to you?" she asked one evening. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to shield her from the tension, but I also didn't want to dismiss her feelings. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean, sweetheart. Don't worry about it," I said, hoping to reassure her. But the strain was undeniable. My health started to falter under the stress. Sleepless nights, constant headaches, and an overwhelming sense of fatigue became my new normal. I visited a doctor who confirmed that stress and exhaustion were taking their toll. "You need to find a way to reduce your workload," he advised. Easier said than done. One night after putting Lily to bed, I overheard a conversation between Margaret and George. They were in the living room, speaking in hushed tones, but their words carried through the thin walls. "She's not good enough for Thomas. I've always thought so," Margaret said. George's reply was inaudible, but Margaret continued. "If she can't handle this household, maybe she should leave. Thomas could do better." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Her words replayed in my mind as I struggled to process the betrayal. For years, I had tried to make things work, to keep the peace. But this was too much. The next morning, I called Thomas. "We need to talk," I said. When I told him about the conversation, he was silent for a moment before responding. "I'll handle it when I'm back, Emily. Just hang in there for now." His response felt like a Band-Aid on a deep wound. I knew he meant well, but I also knew that waiting wasn't an option. Something had to change. A week later, an opportunity presented itself. My sister, Rachel, invited Lily and me to stay with her for a while. "Come for a visit," she said. "You need a break." It was the excuse I needed to step away from the chaos. I informed Margaret and George of my plans. Margaret barely looked up from her knitting as I spoke. "Do what you want," she said dismissively. George gave me a polite nod, his expression unreadable. As I packed our bags, Lily's excitement was infectious. "We're going on an adventure, Mom," she said, her eyes sparkling. I smiled, her joy a small reprieve from my anxiety. The drive to Rachel's house was long but liberating. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. Rachel welcomed us with open arms, her warm smile a stark contrast to Margaret's perpetual frown. "You look exhausted," Rachel said as she handed me a cup of tea. "Get some rest. You're safe here." Over the next few days, I began to unwind. Lily played with her cousins, her laughter filling the house. I spent hours talking with Rachel, sharing stories and venting about the struggles I had faced. Her support was a balm to my weary soul. Then, one evening, as we were sitting on the porch, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "Emily, I've spoken to my parents. They've agreed to make some changes. Can we talk about this when I'm back?" I hesitated. The idea of returning to that house, to Margaret's criticism and hostility, filled me with dread. "We'll see," I said, leaving the conversation open-ended. Rachel turned to me after I hung up. "You don't have to go back if you don't want to, Emily. You deserve better." Her words lingered in my mind as I weighed my options. Could I carve out a new life for myself and Lily, away from the toxic environment we had endured? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The days turned into weeks, and Thomas's return drew closer. I knew I had to make a decision. Late one night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat down with a notebook and began to write. Pros and cons, dreams and fears. I poured everything onto the pages. By the time the sun rose, my path was clear. When Thomas returned, he came straight to Rachel's house. He looked tired but hopeful as he stepped through the door. "Emily, can we talk?" he asked. We sat down in the living room, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "Thomas, I love you," I began. "But I can't go back to that house. It's not just Margaret. It's the environment, the constant stress. I need to think about what's best for Lily and me." Thomas nodded slowly. "I understand. I've been thinking too, and maybe it's time for a change. Maybe we find a place of our own." Relief washed over me as his words sank in. For the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same page. Over the next few months, we worked together to find a new home. It wasn't easy, but the prospect of a fresh start kept us going. Margaret was less than pleased when we told her, but for once, her disapproval didn't faze me. I had made my decision, and I wasn't looking back. As we settled into our new home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Lily thrived in the new environment, her laughter filling the rooms. Thomas and I began to reconnect, rediscovering the love that had brought us together in the first place. Looking back, I realized that leaving wasn't just about escaping Margaret's toxicity. It was about choosing a life that prioritized joy, love, and mutual respect. It was about showing Lily that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. In the end, stepping away from that house was the best decision I ever made. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope and possibility. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Several months later, I received an unexpected call from Margaret. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard. "Emily, I'm sorry. I know I've been hard on you. Can we talk?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. The pain of the past hadn't vanished, but neither had my hope for resolution. "I'll think about it," I replied. As I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. Could this be the start of healing, Or was it another manipulation? I decided not to rush into anything. For now, I had my peace, my family, and a future filled with possibilities.